Thank you so much, Tatum, and band, thank you as well. It's lovely today. The music is just gorgeous, as always. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to First Lutheran. It's good to be the church. I'm so happy to have you here as a part of our family. I have to tell you, we're like 0 for 2 on this thing. 3 strikes and we're out, I guess. So we tried Easter and ended up with this crazy snowstorm, and now today. And by the way, we hatched this plan last Sunday. And of course, last Sunday, it was like 70 degrees and it was warm and there wasn't even a wisp of wind any place. And we're trying to map it out and figure out how we can make things work. And then, of course, last night I get this text message about 9 o'clock from 9:15 from Shelley. And she says, I have all these people asking. And I said, well, what's the weather going to be like? She said, well, low to mid 30s with wind. And I said, well, I don't care if I freeze, but the wind might kill us with the microphones. And so we made that call last night, and of course it's beautiful out there today. The wind is blowing. We would have trouble with the wind. So if if you're angry about it, blame it on Shelley, okay? Happy Mother's Day, Shelley. And happy Mother's Day to all of you as well, Jill. Happy Mother's Day to you. It's good to be here, and it's going to be a good day of celebration for some of you. I suspect you'll get together in small groups. For others, I suspect you'll be doing some Zoom meetings or some FaceTime or just some telephone time. And now today, and by the way, we hatched this plan last Sunday.
What's going on?
We good to go? We got interrupted. We had something going on where I was talking to myself here for a few minutes. Did they hear that out there? Okay, it's all right. It's all good. It's all good. I won't talk to myself anymore as long as you guys don't make me back in the sound booth. So where was I? I was, so Mother's Day. Yes, we've got, and everybody's going to have their plans, and Mother's Day is a time of celebration. At least that's the way it's supposed to be. But, if we're going to be honest, and I think honesty is something we try to shoot for here at First Lutheran as much as we can. Mother's Day, for some folks, it doesn't work out that way for them. It's a reminder that there are some corners in their life that just aren't square. And I want to stop here for just a second because I talked about this last year. Matter of fact, last year, as I mentioned in the sermon, if you want to go back and look at it, you can. That was the first time I'd ever preached a Mother's Day sermon. And I'd always sort of left it behind or went a different direction in the sermon. We always wish people a Mother's Day, but never did it up until last year. And it was just time to take it on in an honest way. Because there are people in our world who they live with life that doesn't have square corners. And then something like Mother's Day comes along and it reminds them that that's what it is for them. And I was going to sort of leave that alone this year, but a year has come and gone, and my phone keeps ringing, and the counseling keeps walking through the door, and all of those issues are silently there for people. You don't see them, you don't know that they're there. They come to church, they smile, everything looks good, but they carry this weight and this grief inside, and it has a lot to do with their families. And so it's Mother's Day, and there are sons and daughters who have recently lost their moms. And it's Mother's Day, and there are moms who have lost children. And it doesn't matter if it's recent or not. No one should die before their child. And they know it most intensely. And it's Mother's Day, and there are people out there who so want to be a mom, but their bodies just aren't letting it happen. It's Mother's Day, and this is way too often an occurrence. We're estranged from our moms. We don't talk to her. Either that or else somewhere along the line when you were growing up, mom dropped the ball in terms of raising you, and it's just something that just sticks with you. And so when I say that Mother's Day is a reminder that life doesn't have square corners, some of this probably sounds familiar to you. You know what I'm talking about. And it's like you just can't make things fit the way it looks like everybody else makes things fit. And that not fitting just creates all kinds of pain. And so, and by the way, you know, I know it's not that way for everybody, and I know that there are folks who get past this, and for many folks, Mother's Day is a celebration, but let's just acknowledge both sides of it, that it's really both for all of us. And frankly, what I'd like to do is I'd like to just, if we're going to celebrate, if we're going to observe it here at the church, let's just make sure we know what exactly it is we're celebrating, because I'm going to guess it probably has little to do with what you think of when you think of Mother's Day. Started in 1908. This was something I mentioned a year ago as well. A woman by the name of Anna Jarvis. She started this in her home church in Grafton, West Virginia. Anna's mom, her name was Ann Jarvis, was a mom not just to Anna, but to lots and lots of people in Grafton and really all around West Virginia. See, for many decades, during and then decades after the Civil War, Anne lived in West Virginia, and she gathered together a group of concerned women. And West Virginia was kind of a funky place at the time, because there were some folks who were Confederate sympathizers, and there were some folks that were Union sympathizers, and some of them were even in the same extended families, and they had to go different directions, even though they cared about each other. And there was poverty, especially after the war, and there was sickness. And so Ann Jarvis, Anna's mom, and this group of concerned women that she spearheaded put together something called the Mother's Day Work Clubs. And they would get together in small groups with young families, and especially with moms, and they would, the stated purpose was simply to help you understand how best to raise your children, how to perform the kind of hygiene that will keep your children safe, how to give them basic nutrition, how to love and care for your child when, you know, you can't, poverty-wise, you can't make ends meet. And that was the stated purpose for the Mother's Workday Clubs, but behind that there was a greater purpose. Ann Jarvis and this group of women, we'd call them community organizers today. They were really in the business of foundation building. And spiritual foundations is really what I'm talking about, because the love of Jesus had captured their heart. He had come into their lives, and he had changed them. He had changed Ann. And in turn, Ann looked around, and she saw such need in her community that she had to do something. And so she was foundation building. Yeah, there's the stated purpose, but then there's the foundational purpose underneath. The love of Jesus that first enters her heart and then goes out to others. And so Ann and these women, they weren't just moms to their biological children. They took on most of West Virginia. And so Anna Jarvis in 1908, 3 years after her mom's died, decides that it's a good idea to memorialize these folks, to remember them and to honor them, and also to encourage other women to go and do the same kind of thing, to be captured by Christ and set foundations for others. Setting foundations, that's what it's about. I want to tell you a little story about my own mom in that regard. So last year at this time, I was able to stand here at the start of the sermon and wave at Mom and say, "Hi, Mom, how you doing?" And she wasn't in the building. She was at home in Sioux City, but she was watching our brand new live stream, the one that you're watching here today. And of course, it's a year later, and that's not possible anymore. As many of you know, my mom passed away this winter. And I remember that week and the weeks ensuing quite well. We spent so much time together, the three of us, my brother, my dad, and I, and our families. My wife was there, Doug's wife was there, some of the grandkids. And we were just doing and working through all the things that happen when a death occurs in the family. And something kind of odd happened, at least odd for me. And Jill noticed it first. This was after the funeral, and she said, "You know, I don't think I saw you cry once." And I will tell you that that is so not me, because when it comes to emotions, I wear it on my sleeve. But I hadn't cried. Not at all. Hadn't felt the need. And, you know, I think about that, and I think I know the reason for that. I think it has something to do with the way Doug and I were raised. We were raised in the faith. I mean, there wasn't a Sunday that gone by or a Wednesday night that went by without us going to church. There was no discussion, there was no argument. We just did it, and we knew that we were going to do it. We expected it. We got so that we looked forward to it because it was just a part of who you were as a Grindberg, who you were when you lived under that household, under that roof. And I know Mom and Dad, they early on, they made a decision about us that of all the gifts they could give us, there was one gift above all gifts. And it had nothing to do with the money that they would give us or the money that they would earn or the home that they would provide or the clothes that they would put on our backs or later on the cars that they would let us drive or any of those things that, as Jesus says in the 6th chapter of Matthew, those things that the moth will eat and the rust will consume and the thief will steal. No, Mom and Dad early on decided that of all the gifts they could give us, the most important gift is the gift of eternal foundations, of treasures laid up, stored up in heaven. And that's what they did. And they not only instilled that in us by regular attendance. We didn't go to church because it was the end thing to do or to see people and be seen by others. We went because it's who we were. It's because it's who they were. And it's because it's who Mom was, who she was. And it hadn't occurred to me until after the funeral, when Jill mentioned that. It hadn't occurred to me that all of those years, Mom had been preparing me for March 1st. She had laid, through the life that she gave us and the gift that she imparted upon us, a foundation of eternal things. A foundation that told me that even though her body, her outer nature was wasting away, I mean, it was just dissolving the last couple of years before our eyes. There were lots of tears during that. But as it was happening towards the end when March 1st came, I could see it. The foundation was there. Even though that outer nature was wasting away, day by day, her inner nature was being renewed. That foundation, it reminded me that anxiety in all of its forms would be replaced for her and for me with a peace that passes all human understanding. That foundation convinced me that on March 1st, we parted company, but it would only be for a brief time. And that someday soon, I will see her again, and she will be free of all the trouble and the darkness that she faced those last few years. Eternal foundations. That's the baseline of Mother's Day. So I'd like you to hold that thought and let's sing for a minute.
cast my mind to Calvary, where Jesus bled and died for me. I see his wounds, his hands, his feet, my Savior on that cursed tree. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise his name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise. Oh Lord our God.
So I'd like to turn for a moment to the story that Tatum just read to you. It's the story of Hannah. Hannah is the mother of Samuel in the Old Testament, and Samuel is the first prophet of God's people. And Hannah's story is there's only one really mention of her in the Bible, only one place where you know anything about her, and that's in 1 Samuel chapter 1 and chapter 2. She doesn't appear before, she doesn't appear after, any place else in the scriptures. And her story is an interesting one because it is a story about those very kinds of foundations. And frankly, it's a foundation that starts with her and the way she saw her life. So Hannah is married. She's married to a man by the name of Elkanah. And Elkanah has two wives. He has Hannah, and then he has another woman. Her name is Peninnah. I'm just going to call her Penny. It's easier for me to remember as I'm preaching. So Penny is loaded with children. She has given Elkanah all kinds of children. And Hannah is unable to have children. And this causes a great pain in her heart, just like the silent pain that we've been talking about earlier this morning that so many folks experience when it's Mother's Day. It is a Mother's Day kind of pain, and she lives with it all the time. It's always there. It's gnawing at her. And what's more is that the world around her is not particularly kind to Hannah. So first we have Penny, who gloats and makes fun of Hannah because she can't have children. Imagine that. Such cruelty. And then there's Elkanah. And I tell you, this guy, he's a treat. He is such a guy. He has no clue as to what he's doing. He loves Hannah dearly, but he just doesn't know how to fix things. So I don't know if this is pop psychology or if he just has a big head, but he sees that Hannah is down and depressed. And he says, "Oh, don't be sad, Hannah. You have me. And aren't I better than 10 sons?" Can you imagine that? That's read it. It's in 1 Samuel chapter 1. Aren't I better than 10 sons? Just buck up, Hannah. It'll be okay. And then even Hannah's priest, his name is Eli, he catches her in a moment when that concealed grief, it just comes pouring out of her. And she's moving her lips, but nothing's coming out of her mouth because she's in such grief. And Eli goes to her and says, "Are you drunk? What's wrong with you?" And through it all, there is that pain, that ache that no one sees. And you know, pain like that, it has a way of getting to you. And it does all kinds of things to sour your soul and spirit. I mean, there are any one of a number of directions that Hannah could have gone. And in fact, other women in the Bible who came before her, who were in a very similar kind of situation, that's exactly where they went. I mean, things like not only sadness and grief, but self-pity, self-loathing, anger, spite, spitefulness. All of those things can kind of come bubbling up when pain is down at the root of who you are. I mean, certainly that's what happened with Sarah. She comes along several hundred years before Hannah. And Sarah, as you know, is married to Abraham. She's not able to have children, but the slave girl is. The slave girl's name is Hagar. And when Sarah finally has a child, she becomes so jealous of Hagar and the child, who's supposed to have the birthright, that she has Abraham kick him out of the house. And then a few years later, here comes Rachel. And she and her sister are married to the same husband. Don't you love this? One guy married to all these women. I don't get it, but it's what happened in that day. So she and her sister are married to the same man. And her sister's able to have children. And Rachel is not able to have children. And until she does finally have Benjamin, life becomes this intense blood sport competition between herself and her sister. And that's what happens so often when the pain runs that deep. But it didn't work that way for Hannah. She chose another path. Read it, 1 Samuel chapter 1. She took her pain and her mourning and her grief to God, and she laid it at his feet. And she kept coming at him, and she kept coming at him, and she kept coming at him. Because she knew, instinctively, she knew that the places in her life where the darkness was deepest is the very place where God would enter in and establish a foundation, a relationship. He would come to those places and he would bring healing and wholeness and peace and hope. Hannah knew that. And that's exactly what happened. St. Paul puts it another way. He's, 2 Corinthians chapter 12, he's talking about the fact that he has something, he calls it a thorn in his flesh, something that has tormented him, like that same kind of deep pain. And it says in 12, Paul says, I took it to God 3 times. And he said, relieve me of this thorn. And God said, no. My grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in that weakness. God didn't put the weakness there. God didn't put the pain there. God didn't put the hurt there, but he uses it to draw Paul and you and me closer to him. Where life is darkest, where the pain is most intense, this is where God most profoundly comes into your life. Because you see, in the end, and if you read the story carefully, you'll see this. It's not the birth of Samuel that saves Hannah. It's the journey there. A journey in which she invited God. And he walked with her through the darkness. And he held her hand through all of this life that did not have square corners. And that relationship became her foundation. And then comes Mother's Day. She passes the foundation on to Samuel. Let's sing.
His body bound and drenched in tears, they laid him down in Joseph's tomb, the entrance sealed by heavy stone, Messiah still
So let me ask you a couple questions. First of all, where's your foundation? If you find that foundation is built on a life that doesn't have square corners, and by the way, there isn't a life out there listening to me today that has square corners. Let's just get that one out in the front. No matter how good everyone looks, present company included, lives are messy. Square corners do not exist for us. And so let me ask you again, where is your foundation? If it's built upon anger, strife, jealousy, hardship, self-pity, self-loathing, then I will tell you that when it comes to the people who are around you, that is the legacy that you're going to leave with them as well. That brings me to question 2. Don't those things belong to God? Don't they belong to the one who will take that darkness, that pain, and make that the place where he bonds with you and transform all of that darkness into a life of light and hope and promise? Then, of course, once that happens, the sky's the limit. You got your children at home. Some of you do, some of you don't. There are all kinds of children all over the place here. All of them looking for someone to help them lay a foundation of life and hope. Story that William Willimon tells about an inner city church, and it was a church that was in a neighborhood that was in transition, and so the only people left in the church were these retired folk, and it was getting smaller and smaller by the day. And they had just hired this young new pastor, and she came in and she's asking, where are the children? And they said, well, children? We don't have any children. They're all gone. They've left the house. They've got their own children now. We're grandparents. Some of us are great-grandparents. And so they came in and they would do their sewing and they would do their work in the church and the doors would be locked. And this pastor one day noticed that along about 3:30, the school was just up the corner and the bell would ring and the kids would go out and they would walk right past the front door of the church. True story. And she said, I have an idea. And so she got a couple of guys to roll a piano out on the front sidewalk. And she got some of those women who were in the building sewing to sew on the front steps. And she got some others to get a little bit of candy. And you know something? I have to tell you that when it comes to the church, I am not beneath bribery. Okay? And so 3:30 comes along, the bell rings, the kids come, and the music is going, and the candy's flowing, and these women are sitting up there sewing, and the kids stop and say, what are you doing? Oh, we're sewing. You want to come up and check it out? And pretty soon the doors are open, and it happens another day, and it happens another day, and pretty soon the kids, they don't need the piano outside. They make a beeline from the school into the front door of the church, and they're there 4 and 5 days a week. And all of a sudden, this church became a family. And those women became moms in ways that they never dreamed possible. Simply because Jesus had changed their life. And now they saw a way to share that with little ones who became their new children. So where's your foundation? Where does it lie? I hope and pray that along the way you will see that whatever it is you're carrying really belongs to Jesus, and that he will heal you, and that he will make you whole, and that he will turn you then into a bricklayer, a foundation builder for lives that desperately need someone to love them. Amen.